Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Kuf Yud Aleph. We are remarkably 1 week from finishing Bava Kamma. Hard to believe. Next week we will finish it. I am sorry that I'm going to be away that week. I'm going to be away Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, so I'm not going to be teaching. Dove is going to be teaching, but he'll be only on Zoom, so we won't have class next week. But so yeah, exactly. Go to the second floor and you can participate in their tefillah. That would be wonderful. Okay, so we are, let me share my screen. I will not be here Tuesday. I mean, I'll be here for davening on Tuesday, but we're not going to have a class on Tuesday. Okay, yeah, no worries. All right, so let's share screen, and here we go. So yesterday we learned a Mishnah that contained the basic details of what happens if one robs a convert, swears falsely about it, and then the convert dies, and the robber wants to achieve atonement. So what do you do? So because the robber robbed and swore falsely, he's obligated to, if it were just a regular person, he would owe the person's heirs the principal, a 1/5 penalty, which is not actually a penalty, it's sort of like a supplement, because even if you admit it, you still owe it. So it's not actually viewed as a knas, it's just a supplemental payment for redemption as part of the redemption process. And then in addition, you would need to bring a korban asham. So those are the three things that you need to do. Now, what happens if the person that you robbed was a convert and that person dies? So now you can't give it back to him. And if he dies without children, so he has no heirs. As a result, there's no one that you can give it to him that he's related to. And so as a result, the Torah says in Sefer Bamidbar, Parshas Mato, that that you actually give those funds to the Kohanim. Parak Vav, Pasuk Zayin. So you give those funds to the Kohanim. And so our Mishnah now discuss the following. Discuss a couple of situations where what happens if the robber dies along the way on his way to Yerushalayim. What happens? So if he dies before he gets there, so then we said that the robber's heirs get the money. So even though the robber was supposed to give it back, once his inheritors take it, so then they get to keep it because they weren't the robbers. And now we have what is known as Shinui Rishus, a change of possession, and we have Yeyus, and we're assuming that the original owner has given up hope of ever recovering. So as a result, that is a situation where we would allow the children to just keep the money. However, we pick up today by quoting the next line in the Mishnah regarding the robber.
Just your speaker, that you're losing some of half of your words.
Okay, I'll try and be more careful. Thank you. Where the robber now has died after giving the funds to the Kohanim, but he has not yet brought the Asham. And so our Mishnah said that the money stays with the Kohanim. And so the Gemara is going to learn a lesson from this fact as we pick up at the two dots in the middle of the 8th line from the bottom of 110b of Kuf Yud Amud Bet. So Nasan Esa Kesef La'anshe Mishmar. So if you gave the money to the people of that particular Kohanim watch, and now the robber has died, and so as a result, now we said that the Kohanim get to keep it. So Amar Abaye Shmamina Kesef Mechaber Matzah. We can see from this that in fact that a partial atonement is achieved by the payment of the money. Because if it hasn't actually achieved any atonement, Havamina Mader Liyorshin. I would have thought that the Kohanim need to give it back to the heirs. My time, why would they need to give it back to the heirs? Because they would the robber would never have given the money to the Kohanim, but for the fact that it was a necessary step in the atonement process. But he didn't get a chance to give his atonement korban. He didn't get a chance to give his asham, and so as a result, he wouldn't want the Kohanim to keep it if he didn't get atonement. However, if he does achieve some level of atonement, so then of course he would want the Kohanim to keep it. So the fact that it shows that Elamiyata, so as a result, that's the basic point. He wants to get some level of atonement. That's why it's going to be a valid gift. But Elamiyata, once you've raised this issue of Adaita Dahachi Lo Yavle, that maybe somebody could do something that he wishes he hadn't done because he never finished his goal. If that's true, why not say that if somebody sinned, they did a sin by accident, and now they have to bring the korban, and unfortunately that person dies before the korban is brought. Now we have a special rule. We have a special rule that the chatas that the owner set aside before he died needs to basically die. We should effectively starve the animal so that way, because it's because there's nothing to be done with it. It's set aside for a chatas, and you can't offer it as a chatas, so that's it. But we say, but we don't say. So why not say that he didn't designate the animal, he didn't set it aside as a chatas offering with in mind that it would be killed. So Amre Chata Shemesu Bala Hilchas Gamira like the Lamisa Azla. No, the issue is that we have essentially a learned tradition, a tradition that is passed down from Moshe Rabbeinu and a halacha l'Moshe Misinai essentially that says that that's what happens to that animal. So okay, so you've made an exception for a chatas because we have a tradition from Moshe Rabbeinu. But what about an asham? Why not let the asham korban itself go out and be considered unconsecrated? Why do you instead? What did we say that you do with an asham if the owner dies? We said that you let it get a mum and then you sell it, and the funds go to a special fund for korbanot when the altar isn't busy. So why not say that the owner didn't want to set it aside for this reason? So Asham Nami Hilchas Gamira La. Here too, with respect to an Asham, that also is a tradition passed down from Moshe Rabbeinu. So Kol Shebechatas Mesa Ba'asham Roeh. That any kind of situation where the sin offering needs to die, the asham offering needs to graze until it gets a mum, and then you sell it, and then you can put the funds in the special fund for the korbanot to keep the altar busy. So Alamayata, again, let's deal with another situation where somebody is giving something and you wouldn't have thought that somebody would have wanted to give it if they knew what was going to happen. Elamayata yuvama shenafla lefnei muka shchin tepik below chalitza. Let a woman whose husband has passed away and he's passed away without any children. So now she's supposed to marry her brother-in-law, and unfortunately, that brother-in-law is a disgusting person who's physically repulsive. And so why should we not let her get out of that marriage even without chalitza? We instead require the couple to do chalitza. And because we could say she didn't marry her brother with that in mind. Now, Tosos here asks a couple of interesting questions. First of all, he points out that it must be that we're talking about where the marriage is just the erisin, not the nisuin. Because at that point, once there's nisuin, of course she wants to get married. There are many advantages to being married. She has a husband who's going to support her. And so as a result, and who has made certain commitments to her. But when it comes to Arison, essentially, she has none of the advantages and all of the disadvantages of being married. And so as a result, that's the stage that we're talking about. And then Tosfos asks, it's the last Tosfos on Kuf Yud Amabet, Ve'im Tomar. It's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 lines up in the Tosfos. First abbreviation on the line. Ve'im Tomar. Adam shekana mechaberu shum davar v'niskalkel yivata amekata daita hachi lo kana. Why don't we say this principle? Once we're raising this principle I didn't intend for this kind of transaction, why don't we say that if I were to buy a computer from you and then the computer were to break, so could say I daita hachi lo kana. I didn't buy it from you with that purpose in mind. So v'yesh lomar. So the Tosfos answers dahasam lav belokech l'chudei talya milsa, that it's not the buyer alone who makes the transaction. Ela kamo kain b'das mocher. You need to have the same intention on both parties to the transaction. Umocher aknalei adaita dahachi. And the seller certainly had in mind that he would sell the object, the computer, even if it were broken. So he doesn't want to undo the transaction. Aval hacha, the kedushin bidida. But here, when we're talking about the kedushin, when we're talking about getting into the step of erison, it all depends on her, kaima. V'hu einu choshesh hekdaita lehit kadesh. And he's not concerned about this. V'chein gabi makdish nami b'didei kai. And similarly, when we had the interpretation of the Batas and the Asham, it all was dependent on one individual person. And so that's where we will say, Adaita dahachi lo kana. V'chein nosein hagezel b'didei kai. And similarly, when the robber gives the Kohanim the property, it's also all dependent on the one side. So when you have a one-sided transaction, that is where we'll say the concept of a daiti. Okay. So that is so now so we have this question that the Gemara asks about the woman. Why wouldn't she have in mind that she wouldn't want to be married to this brother-in-law? So Hasam Anansadi Deminach Nithala Becholdahu, that actually she is good with even though she might become the connected to this brother who is a mukashrin. Karesh Lakish, because it's like Rish Lakish said to Amarish Lakish, Tavla Mesav Tandu Dil Mesav Armalu, that in fact it's better to stay have a partner than it is to be alone. And so as the result, that's why it's the point is that she's accepting the prohibitions and the limitations associated with being in Arison, because she knows that it's going to result in her being coupled, and being coupled is better than being alone. So, all right, so we're on Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. We're at the 2 dots at the top of the page, and we say Nasan Esa Kesef Yaho Yariv. And we had the situation in our Mishnah where what happens when you have a question about the ordering of giving the principal before the asham. We know that you have to pay back the money before you can bring the atonement, because you can't get atonement until after you give back the money. So the Gemara is now going to quote a brisa that addresses what happens if the asham is given to the first mishmar and the money is given to the second. So we're going to have a debate. So Tanu Rabbanim, Nasan Yashav Yaho Yariv, you gave them asham, the korban asham, to the first mishmar, Lechesef Yidaya, and you gave the money to the second. Now again, the problem is that you need to give the money before the korban. So Yachzir Kesef Etzel Asham. So the money should go back to where the asham is. So the asham is with the second. The asham was with the first group, and so the people in the second group need to give the first group the money. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. The Chacham saying no. Yachzir Asham Etzel Kesef. The asham that was given to the first group, they have to go to where the money is. So, Heiki Dummy, what's the story? So, why is it that that's the case? If we're going to say that the asham was given to the first group in the time of their mishmar, of the time that they were on duty, and the money was given to the second group in the time that they were on duty. So each one really was given what they deserved. So why should there be any kind of transfer? So Amarava Hakabamaskina. Diyav Ashav Liyaho Yariv B'Mishmarto Diyahariv. V'Kesef Liyadaya B'Mishmarto Diyaho Yariv. Where you gave everything happened during the time of the first watching. And so as a result, here is the thing. Rabbi Yehuda says, Kaven delav mishmeris de since it's not the right time for the second watching, so they're not on duty yet, and yet you gave them the money. Hilkach liyadaya kansinan like. So therefore, we're going to penalize the second group and tell them yachzir kesef etzel asham. You have to go return the money to the first group where the asham is located. The Rabbanan Sabri and the rabbis say, no, it's the exact opposite. Shelo Kadinyahu to Avud B'nai Yehoyariv. When it came to the people of Yehoyariv, they were the ones who acted improperly. To Kiblu Asham Mikamei Kesef, because they received the Asham before the Kesef was given. And we know that you need to give the Kesef before you can gain atonement. So Hilkach Lididhu Kansinan Lahu. And so therefore the rabbis say, we're going to penalize them. The Yachzor Asham Etzel Kesef. And so they need to give the Kesef, they need to give the Asham, to where the Kesef is, even though Yedaya is not on duty yet. And Tanya, we have a brisa that we're going to now teach 3 brises that modify Rabbi Yehuda's situation. So I'm a Rebbe, and all of them are taught by Rebbe.
Why would this occur? Isn't the person supposed to come with the asham and the kesef more or less simultaneously?
100%. You're absolutely right that's what he's supposed to do. But somehow he either forgot something, he left it in his hotel room. That's probably the easiest example here. I'm sure we've all had this happen. You leave the house, you have your keys, but you don't have your wallet. And so he has his keys, and so he takes his animal with him, and he's ready to give the animal as an asham. But then he's like, "Oh my gosh, I thought I had my wallet here with all the money that I'm supposed to pay back, but I didn't." All right, well, listen, I'll give it to you. Then he goes back, and he goes back to his hotel room. I'm making this all up, obviously. And he goes back to his hotel room. He takes the one, and he walks out, and he sees that the Kohanim from the next group are on their way to Yerushalayim. And, he's in Yerushalayim, but they're on their way to the Beit HaMikdash because they're going to get on duty. And so as a result, he's like, hey, I know that you're the next group on duty. Let me give you this money because I want to make sure that the money goes to the right, goes to the Kohanim. And so he's now given the money to the Kohanim, but the Kohanim were only in the second group, and he gave the Asham to the first group. That's the kind of situation that we're talking about. Obviously, if he was doing what he was supposed to do, you're absolutely right. He would have given the money and the money first and the asham second, and he would have given it all to the same group because he's supposed to bring it all together. So now again, Rabbi Yehuda says that we take the money and we bring it back to the asham group, and so we're going to qualify that. So I'm a Rebbe. The Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, im kadmu b'nei Yehoyariv v'hikrivu es ha'asham. If the first group brought the asham offering, yachzor v'yasham v'yavi asham akar. The person needs to bring another asham, and that makes total sense because we said that the person needs to bring the money before they bring the asham. If they bring the asham first, it's not a good offering. V'yakrivuhu b'nei Yodaya. And it's the second group that's going to offer it. V'zacho halalu b'masha biyadan. But the first group gets to keep what they have. Okay, so now 1 second, what they have is the meat, presumably, and the skin. So Amru, but 1 second, if you get to keep what you have, how is that asham, that first asham, fit for being offered? Asham pasalu. It's a disqualified asham, so nobody can eat the meat. So Amarava laoro, that the point that Rebbe was saying is that actually, if you did bring it, if the first group brought it, they would still get the hide that's associated with it. So Tanya, next brisa, with Rebbe modifying Rebbe Yehuda, Amar Rebbe Ledivre Rebbe Yehuda im kayim asham yachzor asham etzel kesef. That if the asham is still in existence, so then the asham should go to where the money is. Oh, that was exactly the opposite of what our earlier brisa said. V'ha Rebbe Yehuda yachzor kesef etzel asham islay. Rabbi Yehuda is the one who said that the money goes to the asham, that the second group has to give the money to the first group, not that the first group gives the asham to the second group. That was the view of the rabbis. So we're going to qualify the situation. That if the first group, they realize, you know what? The first group realizes that the guy didn't give them money. And so as a result, they know that they can't bring the asham because they don't have the money. And yet they did not seek to find out what happened to the money and thereby claim it from the second group. So if their duty was finished and their week of service was over, and now it's the time of Yedaya, so Vahakamashmalan, the Achuli Achil Gabayu, they will be considered to have waived their rights to the money, and now they have to give the asham to the second group. And so that's why Rebbe says that there is a situation where Rebbe Yehuda would agree to the rabbis that if at the end of the first week, the first watch's week, they have not made the claim on the money, so then they'll lose that claim, and the asham service gets brought to the second group. And Tanya Idak, we've got one more barisa with Rebbe speaking out.
But where's the animal? Haven't they already sacrificed it on the Mizbeach? The animal's on the smoke.
Excellent question. We're dealing with a situation where they either for whatever negligence or because they knew that they needed to get the money first, they did not offer the sacrifice. The sacrifice in the second case is still in existence, 100%. The animal is not yet dead. And so as a result, that is why they will wait, they'll give that animal to the second group in order to bring the sacrifice.
So, but where haven't they gone? There are 24 mishmarot. So this group, they finished. They went back to Netanya. They went back. They're not there anymore.
So
how do they meet this? The animals. The guy comes back 4 days later. The second group is there. The first group, they're in Netanya. They're in Tiberia. They're not. How do they make the transaction? Is the animal just sit in a room somewhere? How does the second group know that this animal was from a supposed asham, which went by mistake to the first group?
So if my memory serves me right, and I'm definitely not one to trust memory, but I believe that over Shabbos, both groups serve. And so there is a transition between the two groups. And so as a result, presumably the first group would tell the second group, hey, Yonatan brought this carbon, but he never gave us the cash associated with it. And so as a result, we never offered this asham for asham gzela, this asham for the theft from a ger. And so as a result, the second group says as soon as they get it, oh, fabulous, because Yonatan gave us the money. So we actually have the money, so we can bring this carbon. So then they would bring the carbon. But you're absolutely right that there would need to be some kind of transition of the carbon from the first group to the second group. But yes, there is an overlap of service when that handoff could happen. And so that's what we must be talking about here. Because remember, the situation, the facts are that the person gave both the carbon and the money during the week that the first group was on duty. but they gave the money to the second group because the second group got there because they get there before Shabbos, right? Everybody's serving on Shabbos. So the second group gets there before the end of the first group service. And so then everybody serves, again, that's my recollection, everybody serves on Shabbos, and then the transition is complete and you're done. And so and if they don't both serve on Shabbos, at least the second group has to be there for Shabbos so that they can begin service immediately after Shabbos. So the point is that there is an opportunity for that transition, and there's an opportunity to make the mistake that this robber made of giving the money to the second group and the asham to the first group. And so if that happens and the first group doesn't close the loop and finish the process for that asham, so then the second teaching of Rebbe is that the second group gets to finish it. So Tanya Ida, we've got another teaching again. Amar Rebbe, L'divrei Rebbe Yehuda, im kiyim asham. Again, here's another situation where the asham is still in existence. And again, that was the language that we had in the second case as well, where the asham still is alive. Yachzor kesef esel asham. So the money goes to where the asham is. Well, one second, easily. Why are you telling me this, Rebbe? That what you just said is explicitly what Rebbe Yehuda said. So what are you trying to tell us? So Hakabamayaskin, here's what he's talking about. What happens if both groups are done? Meaning if not only did the first week finish and the first group never asked the second group for the money, and the second week finished, but now the second week has also finished, and the second group never asked the first group for the carbon. Well, in that situation, it's going to be so below to and neither of them made any demand of the other. So maybe they both have waived each other's rights, and so the first group should keep the asham and the second group should keep the money. That since they didn't do their demand, everything reverts back to the original rule, and the money goes back to the first group, and the first group would actually have to make the offering. Now, the question is, presumably, they would hold it until 24 weeks later when they are back in service in the Beis Hamikdash. So an interesting situation, but that is the proposal. That's what Rebbe says would end up happening, which is interesting because I might have thought that everything should just be given to the third group, but that is not what Rebbe says.
That's a third group. You bring a third group in there.
Yeah, because I would have thought that why wait for another 24 weeks to bring this asham? Let the asham be brought by a third group and the money go to the third group. After all, they didn't, the first two groups didn't do what they were supposed to do. But the answer is no, we're going to wait 24 weeks. The first group was supposed to get everything, and so we'll give that first group everything. Okay.
Well, who takes care of the animal for 24 weeks to make sure it's still the animal doesn't become bustle, doesn't have moom, the animal's still not sick?
That is an excellent question, and I do not know the answer to it. I presume, there was definitely a lot for animals, in or near the Beis Hamikdash, so that where they would be stored. So maybe it gets stored there and it gets labeled so that people know what it's supposed to be for. But it's an excellent question that I don't have a great answer for. Okay, so now our Mishnah said next that again, the general rule is that if you have to bring the return of the robbery before you bring the asham. So Minahani, how do I know that there is this rule that the robbery needs to be returned? So Amar Rava, the Amar Kra, Ha'asham Hamusha Blashem, La Kohen, Milvad, El Hagiburim, Asher Yachaper Lo. That the concept is that we say that you have to return the guilt payment to the Kohanim, to Hashem, and for the Kohen, milvad, aside from the El Kippurim Asher Yikaper Lo, aside from the sacrifice of atonement. And so as a result, the fact is that the left reference to aside suggests Miklal de Kesef Bereisha, that implies that the first you have the return of the money, and then you have the return of the, and then you have the bringing of the carbon. So well, second, Elamiata, based on that principle, that milvad indicates some level of order. Milvad olas haboker. What about the fact that when it comes to the musaf offering on Pesach, it says milvad olas haboker, aside from the morning offering? Shouldn't we say hakanami miklal the musaf and beresha, that we should offer the musaf before the tamid in the morning? Vatanya, but yet we know minayin shelo yehe davar kodem letamid shel shachar. There's nothing, that no sacrifice that gets brought before the morning tamid. Talmud Lomar, that you should arrange on the altar the olah. Ba'amarava ha'olah, the fact that it says the olah rishona, it refers to the morning tamid, so nothing comes before it. So Amarlei, no, the point isn't just the fact that we have the word milvad, but if we look at the word at the end of that sentence, it's El HaKupurim, the Ram of Atonement, Asher Yechaperbo, that he will atone it for himself with. So there's a future implied, but Dayan Lo Kippur. But the point is he has not yet attained that atonement, and so as a result, that's the point. And we don't have that future language when it comes to the Musaf offering, and so as a result, you can't ask from that question over there. And finally, Nelson Loas HaKeren, if the robber gave the principal back, but he didn't give the 1/5 surcharge, that does not hold back the ability to bring the asham and atonement. So Tanarabanan, Minayan She'im Hevi Me'ila So now we're going to provide the source for that teaching. So Minayan She'im Hevi Me'ila what happens now? We're going to talk as an aside, but we're going to connect it to this case of Gzela, of robbery. But we're going to talk about what happens if you use something from the Beis Hamikdash without permission. Now, if you use something from the Beis Hamikdash without permission, and on some level without recognizing that you did so, that's me'il. That is one of the two things that you can essentially only do by accident, and so violations that you can only do by accident, and so as a result, you didn't realize that it was the Beis Hamikdash's property, and so you've used it. So you're going to have to bring, just like with respect to swearing falsely about the robbery, where you have to bring the principal, a 1/5 payment, and an asham. Same, so too, you have an asham here. It's just an asham gzela. So the point is how do I know that if you bring that if you did the me'ila, that if you brought if you returned the item that you stole and you had not brought the asham offering, or you bring the asham and you did not ashamo below heavy me'ila, or you return the asham, you make the asham offering, but you don't return what you stole, what you took. Shelo yatsa, you have not fulfilled your requirement. Talmud Lomer ke'el ha'asham v'nislach lo, that you have to. Be'el ha'asham v'nislach lo, that with the ram of the asham, it's going to be forgiven to him. This is from Vayikra Parakeh Pasuk Tet Zayin. Uminayan she'im hevi ashamo ad shelo hevi me'ila so shelo yatsa. And how do I know that if you brought the asham before you brought the return payment, that you haven't fulfilled it? Talmud Lomar be'el ha'asham. That first, that with the ram of the asham, ha'asham bikvar. The fact that it's the asham has to come before the ram. So Yaakov Kishem she'el sha'aya ba'asham ma'akvin. Just as the ram and the asham are both essential, maybe I would think that the 1/5 is essential. That it's only the ayil, the ram, and the asham and the principle that are required. Ayil v'asham ma'akvin behektish. Those are the things that are essential. But when it comes to the chomesh, that is not necessary. The yilmad v'yilamed hektish mehedyot v'hedyot mehektish, and we can actually derive some of the rules that apply to me'ila of taking something from hektish to the rules of robbing, and vice versa. Hedyot meaning the common situation, and that's referring to the robbing the in particular. We're talking about robbing a ger, but in any event, robbing anybody and then lying about it triggers then asham. Hektish Mehedyot. We learn the holy Me'ilah from the situation of robbery. Ma Asham Dahasham Karen, just as there Asham learns Asham means the principle. Asham Nahaka Karen. So to the Asham here means the principle. The Hedyot Mehektish, and we learn the situation of robbery from the situation of Milah. Mahektish and Chomish Me'akev. So we learn from Hektish the fact that the 1/5 penalty doesn't prevent you from bringing an Asham. So too here, the 1/5 penalty will not prevent you from bringing the Asham for the theft. So Hadran Halacha goes of Eitzim, Hadran Halacha goes of Eitzim, Hadran Halacha goes of Eitzim, and now we pick up with the 10th parak, the 10th and final parak as of Bava Kamma. So Hagozvel Umakil as Banav, and we saw this previously. If one robs and this is why it connects so nicely to the previous parak. If you steal something, if you rob somebody and you feed it to your children, or if the person passes away, the robber passes away and he leaves it for them as an inheritance, Peturim Milashalem, they do not have to pay back the item. But if it was real property that they took, and we'll see what that's talking about in the Gemara, then they have to pay back. So Amar Rav Chisda says, hey, I can learn something really interesting from this Mishnah. That Gazel Velonis Yashu Habalim, if something was stolen, and I can learn something very interesting, and then we're going to see that we're going to challenge Rav Chisda from our Mishnah. So Rav Chisda says that if I steal something and the owner never gives up hope, and then somebody else eats some of it, the original owner can go and collect from either the robber or the person who ate it. So my timer, what's the reason? Because kol kamad delod nisyashu habalim birshu say demarikai. Because as long as the owner has not given up hope of recovering his property, so then the property remains his. And so when the non-robber eats the property, it's as if he's effectively robbing the original owner because it still belongs to the original owner. And so the original owner can claim that property, can claim recovery, can claim damages from the person who ate it. But 1 second, Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, that if one robs and feeds his children, so his children have eaten the item, and Rav Chisda says, well, that means that you can claim from the children, or it's been left for them as an inheritance, Peturin, Milasham. They are not liable to pay. Oh, but 1 second, the robber's children should aid the stolen property, so they should be liable. So to the Rav Chisda, doesn't this refute Rav Chisda? So Amar Lak Rav Chisda, no, Kitanya li Akar Yeyush, that when we learned our Mishnah, it's referring to where the original owner has given up hope. And so as a result, because the original owner has given up hope, so now when the children eat it or the children inherit it, it's as if they do not have to pay back. Okay, well, so now we're going to have a statement of Rami Bar Kamma. So Amar Rami Bar Kamma.
How do we know that the owner was Miyayesh? Where does that come in? How do you know that?
That's an excellent question. We have not really addressed Yeyush as to how we know that it happens. Obviously, on some level, the owner would need to be honest. There is an aspect of at some point we assume that there's a Yeyush, but you're absolutely right. How do we know it has not been addressed? And I don't have a great answer other than that the person, the original owner, admits it. So now we have a statement of Rami Bar Kamma that we learned from our Mishnah, Zoso Meres, Rishus Yorish Karishus Lokeachtami, that if in fact the children who inherit, they must be considered like a buyer, because we have the concept, if we take a look in Rashi, top narrow line in Rashi, Rishus Yorish, Kirishus Lokeachtami, Bahaviyullah Kirishus Acheres. It's like another person has taken possession. But Kaven to Okimna Lemasnisin Lachar Yesh, and we said our Mishnah is talking about after Yesh. So Kani Lahu Yasme Be Yesh Vashini Rishus. So the orphans have now acquired the property through the concept of Yeyush, of the original owner giving up hope, and then followed by Shinu Rishus, a change in the possession. Because if you were to only have Yeush alone, lo kani, they would not actually make an acquisition. Midulo katani patura ba'avuan, because after all, their father isn't necessarily putter. It's only them who are putter. So now we're going to offer an alternative understanding. Rava Amar Rishus Yorish Lav Karishus Lokachtami. That actually you don't have to read our Mishnah as teaching that the owner's possession, that the inheritor's possessions, the heir's possession, is like the possession of a purchaser. And what's the story with our Mishnah? Kisha Achalum. We're dealing with a situation where the children ate it. And as Rashi says, La'achar Misas Avian, after their father died, the Nigzal, that's when they eat it. The Nigzal and the victim, Ein Yachlu Tovan, they have no ability to claim from them. Shahari Lo Gazalu, because they never stole it, because they had rightful ownership. They never stole it, and it's no longer in existence. And so as a result, there's nothing to be done about it. Well, 1 second, look at the end of our Mishnah. If we were talking about something on which a lien can hold, which refers to real property, so then the heirs are responsible. But if the end is talking about real property, which never disappears, so then the prior case of our Mishnah must also be talking about a case where the object has not disappeared. So Amar Lach, Kamma, Rabba would say to you, no, you're misunderstanding the end of our Mishnah. That what the lesson is that Rabba is seeing here, and this is a lesson that we referenced earlier in the Masechet, is the following. If the heirs of the robber inherit real property, then they are going to be responsible for paying back the stolen item, the value of the stolen item that their father stole, even if the item is no longer in existence. But 1 second, didn't Rebbe teach Shimon his son, to Rebbe Shimon his son, lo davar sheyesh bo achrayas mamish, that when our Mishnah referred to real property, to something that has a lien against it, it did not mean it literally, but rather it meant even a stolen cow with it that the heirs plow with, or chamor or mechamer akrab, or a donkey that's carrying a load and the person is walking behind it. That the children need to return it because of their father's honor, as Rashi says. If we take a look at that Rashi, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines down. What we mean by that is something that's recognizable to the public. The Nira Kol Shah, and it appears at all times, Ka'ain Karka, just like ground. So the cow that is plowed with, or the donkey that is used for a load and goes out in public. So as a result, everybody could go on talis v'kasus, or some kind of covering that the person uses all year. As Rashi continues, they have to return it because of the honor of their father. Shahabrios omros zutalis shagazol ploni, because everybody's going to say, oh, that guy's wearing the talis that his father stole, and that would be a terrible thing to have happen. So as a result, that's why Rebbe taught his son that when we said real property in our Mishnah, it didn't mean it literally. It meant any kind of thing that would be publicly visible and clearly something that is stolen. And so as a result, doesn't that show that we're talking about the item still in existence? And so how can you, Rava, say that our Mishnah was talking about where the heirs inherit the property and then eat it? That's not the case, because clearly we're talking about where the property still exists. Elamaraba Kish Achivna Rabbi Oshaya Nafik Levasi. That when I die, Rabbi Oshaya is going to greet me. Because I answer, explain the Mishnah according to him. The Tani Rabbi Oshaya, because Rabbi Oshaya taught the following, and we'll see that this now explains the Mishnah according to Rava, and contrary to Rebbe. So as a result, Rava, even though he is an Amora, is able to tie his opinion to another Tana, and so as a result, he can argue with Rebbe. Hagoza umachil asbanav. If you rob somebody and you feed the robbery to the children, Peturim Mishalom, they don't have to pay back because, again, we are assuming that it's after Yayush and they've got a Shina Rishus, and so as a result, there's no kind of payment, or because it's no longer in existence, there's no requirement to pay. If it's left before them, Gazela Kayemes Chayavim. Literally the words of effectively of Rava. If the item is still in existence, well, then the heirs will need to return it. Because according to Rava, the heirs are not like a Shinoi Rishus. We will not treat them as a new possessor. But if after they inherit it, it's no longer in existence, Peturim, then they're not going to be liable. If their father leaves them real property, then they do have to pay back. They pay back the value of the stolen item from the real property. So Amar Mar, 1 second, you said Eina Gzela Kayemes Peturin. We have this brisa that now says that a stolen article that's no longer in existence, they're no longer not liable. So name it to Rav Chisda. That's we began today. We began our Gemara this in the second part of today in the 10th parak by quoting Rav Chisda, who says that if you rob somebody and the victim did not give up hope, and another came and ate the item, the victim may collect from either the robber or the one who ate the item. And yet here, the stolen item is no longer in existence by the children, and the children do not have to pay back. So isn't this a refutation? So Amar Lach Rav Chisda would say, Kitanya Dahai, when that ruling was taught, La'achar Yayush, that's talking about after Yayush. And so as a result, that's why you don't have to give it back. So Amar Mar, Gzela Kayemes Chayavin L'Shalim, name it Havi Tuvda Durami Bar Kamma. Well, 1 second, what about when the item is still in existence? In that situation, we say that you still have to return it. And doesn't that refute Rami Bar Kamma? Because Rami Bar Kamma, who was the second commentator that we quoted after our Mishnah, he says that the possession of an heir is like that of a purchaser. So why, when it still exists, does he have to return it? So Amar Lach Rami Bar Kamma, Ki Tanya, when that ruling was taught, Lifnei Yayush, that was taught before anybody gave up hope. And so now we have understood both Rami Bar Kamma and Rav Chisda, and we've understood Rava, and they're all consistent with their own thinking. And sorry for not scrolling. And so, however, it's going to turn out that some people learn Rami Bar Kamma's teaching. Again, Rami Bar Kamma was teaching that inheritors are like purchasers, not in connection with our Mishnah, but in connection with another brisa. So if you want to find out what that brisa is and about what that teaching would mean, please stay tuned to tomorrow's daf.
Can the owner be Mayayish on Karka?
No. No, I don't think that we assume any that there will be Yayish on Karka. So the key is that the fourth of the situations, right, where the father left them real property, the fourth bullet in this list of bullets, we're not talking about where the stolen property was real property. This is saying that if the father left them real property, there would be liability by the children in order to sort of bring honor to their father, so to speak. So I really should have a closed parentheses at the end of that line, but that's the basic idea. But yes, no, we're not saying that there's Yayish by real property. We're assuming that they stole an animal or something along those lines. And so as a result, the owner has given up hope. And so as a result, if it gets inherited, according to Rami Bar Kamma, it would be considered as if you have Yayush and Shina Rishus. And so when this brisa says that even when if the children inherit it and it's still around, they're liable, that's talking about before any Yayush.
So, but are we separating the sefer from the ratio here? That one Tana holds like one according to the ratio, one Tana holds according to the Sefer. Sometimes we do that, not often, but
No. What the situation is that we have Rami Bar Chama, Rav Chisda saying that case number 3 involves post giving up hope, and case number 2 is pre giving up hope. And I'm sorry, and Rami Bar Chama says case number 2 is before giving up hope. So Rav Chisda says that case number 3, when the item no longer exists, they're not liable. That's talking about after giving up hope. And Rami Bar Chama says that case number 2, when the robbed item still exists and is left as an inheritance, they are liable. That's talking about before you give up hope. So what you do have is you have Rami Bar Chama and Rav Chisda establishing this brisa as in being involved, if you hold by both of them, as involving 2 different situations. But it doesn't have to be that Rami Bar Chama holds of Rav Chisda or vice versa. And so as a result, they don't necessarily have to, they could actually say that the entire Mishnah is just consistent with them and not consistent with the other.
Oh, so it could be either Tana could hold the whole Mishnah.
Correct. Either Amora, either Rav Chisda or Rami Bar Chama could hold like this entire brisa of Rav Oshia, and therefore be consistent with him, and they as well as being consistent with our Mishnah. So we've now explained how both Rav Chisda and Rami Bar Chama and Rava all can be consistent with all of the Tanaic statements that we have, with the caveat that Rava is inconsistent with Rebbe. That's very clear. Rebbe is inconsistent with what Rebbe taught his son Rabbi Shimon. That's inconsistent with Rava, but with that caveat, and that's why Rava says that I specifically hold like Rabbi Oshia's interpretation of our Mishnah, but otherwise. We've aligned everybody so that they can read all of the Tanaic texts.
All right.
Yishakar. Thank you so much for your questions. Looking forward to continuing our learning tomorrow.